What's going on, guys? Junior's Fishing Company. Another deer hair jig video. I've got a 1/8 ounce tungsten Northland. I believe this might be a deep V jig. I have a box of jigs and I'm almost certain this is a deep V jig, or it's a Northland tungsten something. I can't remember exactly what it's called. The only tough thing with tungsten jigs like this is these keepers aren't coming off. So you have to tie around them. And this is really thick up here. And I'm gonna fit 2 deer hair stacks. This is gonna be all black with a little gold polar flash in it. But I'm gonna tie my first one down here just to be safe. I could probably fit all 3, but it'd be kind of pushing it. Especially, I don't want to build up too much thread. I've actually got 140 Denier black on here, because even with the 210, it's going to add up a lot. And I don't have a ton of room up by this head. And I usually have a thicker collar. I'm going to try and keep it pretty thin. So this bait in general, I think, is going to remain. I'm going to try and keep it relatively thin. And it's an 1/8 ounce, so I'm not looking for this bait to be 6.5 inches long. It's going to end up being about 4 inches. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get this deer hair, this little patch, not little, I'm going to get all of these little pieces out. So I have to be careful with how tight of wraps I'm doing, because this is 140, it's not 70 Denier, but I'm going to have to kind of be cautious about how much pressure I'm going to apply on this hair, especially when I get to the front. If I break my thread, I break my thread, but I don't want this to be a crazy bulky head to look all weird. I'm going to get that even, and instead of doing super tight wraps, I'll just do more than I would normally do. So I left a lot of room here to try and get it down tight. I usually don't use a ton of 140 Denier. It's either 70 or 210. So I'm just going to jump up here and I can get my next stack, and then I'm going to put down my polar flash. And this stack is a little bit thicker than that one. I've got plenty of super thin baits, so I'm actually using quite a bit of deer hair for a 1/8 ounce jig, but it'll sink slow, really slow. I'm going to get some of these really long hairs out. With all this deer hair, it should sink slower. I mean, an 1/8 ounce jig is going to sink pretty slow either way, but I'll fish it in shallower water. So I'll trim off what I don't want. Make sure my thread is corded. And I want to leave some room right by the head. I don't want to put this deer hair all the way up. But I'm going to have to be careful spinning this around. I don't want to lose any of it. Then I got to work around that bait keeper. What you could actually do with these bait keepers, you could keep it on and tie everything up here. You could just do a single thick deer hair collar and then put a plastic on. You could do that too. But I found that I don't fish with a lot of soft plastics, because it can just take away all the action of the deer hair, because it's just going to suck on to your plastic, and so it would really just be adding a color or something like that, but you do what you want. So I'm going to get that tied down. Again, I just got to be careful with being too mean to this thread, and there really isn't a ton of life in this hair yet. And that's intentional. I have plenty of flare in this next one. I just got nervous. I didn't want to grab too too much hair with the air in it, because I know I can't ream down very hard. So I've got gold polar flash. So you could call this a perch. I mean, this definitely looks like a perchy head with the gold and stuff on the bottom. I'm sure there's a name for it. If you go to Northland.com, or I mean Tackle Warehouse for sure has them. So I don't want the tinsel or the polar flash to be the longest. I want that black deer hair to be the longest thing on this bait. Just going to put that 50-50. I'm not going to add a ton of flash because that head is already gold. So I don't need a ton of flash in this black. So I'll just spin this around. This should already be, I kind of missed this whole side. So I'll measure this out. Again, I just don't want it to be a ton longer. And I'll get that pushed around. With my trusty comb. And a good chunk of this is going to be covered up by my last stack of deer hair anyway. So you add a little bit more than you think you're going to need. But that gold should show through decently enough on this. So I'm going to give this a couple really good wraps. Don't want to trap any of that polar flash. And then I'm going to put some super glue down. I'm going to get right by my head and I'm going to put some super glue down. Just to, I mean, it will increase durability for sure, but really just to make sure that that polar flash doesn't slip. So this last bit of deer hair is really thick, but I'm going to end up trimming it. So I'll put that right up there, cinch it down with 2 wraps, and you can already see how it wants to just push up. You just got to work quick with that super glue sitting right under it. If you let it sit too long, that hair is just going to stick to the super glue. But if you work quick enough, you'll be alright. Get that all pushed down, and then I can grab these butts and pull and get all that flare out of that hair. There's just a couple that are in it too much. Now I'm going to wrap up towards my head with tight wraps, and then I'm going to end up trimming this, but I want to get enough wraps in here so if I hit my thread, because it's black on black, so if I hit that thread, I have enough wraps on here where it's not going to, I'm not going to have to retie this bait. All right, 1/8 ounce Northland tungsten jig, a little bit of gold in there. I love Northland, just makes great jig heads. That's just, maybe I'm a little biased because they're a Minnesota company and that's where I live. But I love the eyes. I love a big eye on a jig head. And these with the red and the gold bottom, this is just a really, really nice jig. In my opinion, that hook's a little bit small and it's a really light hook, but you can't have it all, right? Subscribe and like, leave comments, insults below. Junior's Fishing Company, juniorsfishing.com. Check out the channel. See you in the next one.